Welcome back to My Trauma's Chronic, Not My Chronic, where we embark on a captivating journey into the intricate world of human behaviour. I'm thrilled to have you join us as we delve deep into the mysteries, complexities, and beauties that lie behind every action, every decision, and every interaction. In today's episode, we have the privilege of being joined by a true luminary in the field of behaviour analysis. He's not only an esteemed author, speaker, and educator, but also a passionate advocate for understanding the depths of human behaviour and leveraging that knowledge for positive change. Please join me in welcoming the insightful Andy Barker. From unravelling the fundamental principles of behaviour analysis to exploring the nuances of neurodiversity and trauma-informed approaches, Andy Barker brings a wealth of experience and wisdom to our conversation. Together, we'll explore how behaviour shapes our lives, our communities, and our world, and how understanding it can lead to profound insights and transformative outcomes. So, whether you're a seasoned professional seeking fresh perspectives, a curious individual intrigued by the complexity of human nature, or someone simply eager to make positive impact in the world, you're in the right place. Get ready to be inspired, challenged, and enlightened as we embark on this exhilarating journey of discovery together. Grab your cup of tea, get cozy, and let's get started. Andy, can you tell me a bit about yourself and what you do?
I can, yeah. So my name is Andy Baker. I am a behaviour specialist, author, managing director, podcast host. I've got a few accolades to my name, I suppose, that I keep adding to over the time. I don't like to get bored. So my main occupation is I'm the managing director and head trainer of Able Training Support Limited, which are a national training company specializing in the health and social care sector and specializing in behavior management. And we're also the lead external training organization of the Alzheimer's Society. So we deliver on behalf of the Alzheimer's Society across the UK, as well as courses across the whole of the spectrum of the care sector. Yeah, and also then author and business mentor and anything else I can put my hand to. 100%. So that's me.
So a bit of a multi-potentialite then.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Don't like to sit still for long.
Yeah. You don't have to answer this question, but do you have ADHD or like autism?
Traits. Yeah.
Mm.
So yes, it's been mentioned. There's some family history.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Like the one part that we're going to focus on is the behavioral analyst side of things.
Yeah.
Can you share with us, like, like a pivotal moment or experience that sparked your interest in behavior analysis and set you on the path?
I can. Yeah. So when I was at school, I actually wanted to be a zoologist. That's what I dreamed of being. I always loved animal behavior. I always say that I actually wanted to be David Attenborough, like not just be like him, be literally him. So I wanted to be able to travel around the world and be on TV and talk about animals and things like that. So that's why I ended up doing biology and drama at school, because I thought, well, that's definitely what he studied. I
Really?
kind of lost my way a little bit and didn't go down the zoology route. But I think it was always partly because I didn't connect with a lot of the stuff that was covered in the biology stuff that was a bit more scientific or molecular and stuff like that. It didn't interest me. It was behavior that really interested me. I didn't really discover human psychology until I got mugged at knife point when I was 16 years old. And that was a bit of a life-changing incident for me, in the fact that rather than kind of experiencing maybe your typical fight or flight response, I went into a hyper analytical kind of process of I need to understand why I didn't take certain action, why I didn't defend myself, why I didn't run away, why I didn't stand up for myself, whatever it was. So I then went down this journey of self-reflection and exploring and discovered psychology, mainly through the work of a guy called Jeff Thompson, who was a martial artist that had a lot of time for, but he introduced me to the idea of fear response. And that started my kind of passion project, really, where I started reading about it and exploring psychology, and then didn't really do a lot with it until I got made redundant from a job, and I decided that I was going to go back to university and study psychology, and then started studying psychology, and then went on to counselling, and then kind of haven't stopped since, as far as studying various aspects, whether behaviour management models or the psychology aspects of life. So that was kind of where my journey started.
Really. I think often, I think people, they think about, fight, fight, and freeze. But in the aftermath, people don't realize how analytical people can become. Because
Hmm.
I know for me, with the experiences that I've gone through in life, I need to understand every aspect of my behavior, every aspect of how I respond, every aspect of everything that's going on around me and
Yep.
why it's that way.
Yes.
And, some people will go down the astrology route, some people will go try and make sense of like signs around. And then there's some people that, will go through the biological or psychological aspect of response.
Hmm.
And I feel like a lot of people don't realize how common it is for people to respond that way.
Hmm. Yeah.
In your early career, there must have been some challenges you've encountered. What were they? And how did you like overcome them?
Do you mean from a kind of a business, or a like within the job, or do you mean specific incidences and things like that?
Like like the job in general.
Yeah, job in general. Um, well, one when I was because I studied my degree kind of part time alongside what else I was doing, so that was definitely a challenge as part of things is concerned. Um, I've always been I've always been a bit of I hyper focus quite a lot. I can be a little bit manic in my behaviors, and therefore a bit like now. So I run 8 different businesses currently. So I like to keep myself quite busy, but that also then leaves me very vulnerable to burnout and things like that. So because I can get hyper focused, and I sometimes stop to sometimes I forget to eat, or sometimes I forget to do anything else. So that's one thing that I've over the years learned to be very mindful of and very self-aware of. I am very strict with my routine and my schedule, including not just for my working life, but also for my non-working life. So again, that analytical kind of approach to things continues through. So I have certain habits that I go through that are about just well-being. So physical well-being, as well as kind of taking some time out and things like that, alongside whatever I'm doing, far as career-wise and job-wise is concerned. So that's probably one of the bigger challenges, kind of managing my own mental health and well-being throughout the process, at the same time being quite, I think some would say, high achieving. I always say moderately achieving, because I struggle to necessarily build myself up in the same way as I should. But yeah, so to be able to do that, I have to be I have to be very mindful, very self-aware.
What are some of the key lessons you've learned about human behavior that have significantly influenced your approach to like research or practice or, your life?
Mhm. So this is one of the things that's been really beneficial as I kind of explored psychology, um, and behavior. It has completely changed my perspective on my approach to life. One of the big things is, I always think a take home message is it's nothing personal. And it's easy to kind of say that, and most people will throw that kind of phrase around when they are and nobody wants to hear that. For instance, I was doing some support for some foster parents the other day, and a guy expressed that how annoying he found that very phrase from one of the professionals when he was dealing some quite severe and difficult behavior from one of the children that he was doing his best to support. It's nothing personal. It's an easy thing to say. It's a difficult concept to get your head round. That it is always what's going on in their world, even though it feels incredibly personal to you. There's a wonderful phrase, and I remember I heard it on TikTok. I think it was TikTok or Instagram, something like that, which was a guy kind of saying, um, "It's nothing personal. Don't attribute to malice what could be attributed to incompetence or to ignorance." And I thought that was a fantastic way of kind of looking at the world that I'd kind of known about for a while, but I hadn't heard it put as articulately as that. But when somebody's cutting you off in traffic, it's they're having a bad day rather than anything to do with you personally. Even when your partner is rude to you or ignores you, it's about them. It's not about you. So that's one of the most important lessons when it comes to human behavior. That it's nothing personal. Because to be able to properly analyze behavior, to properly understand it, we have to remove ourselves from it. If we personalize it, we make it about us. We may That's going to trigger a potentially emotional response from us. And therefore we may affect our ability to kind of really understand what's going on behind the behavior, what that person is feeling in that moment. So that's big lesson number one.
Absolutely. I think that's something, when I'm delivering training or do some lecturing, I do remind people. I think people find it hard to remove themselves from situations because
Mhm.
they're so emotionally involved or whatever it may be, but you're unable to get a full perspective on things. It's like, for example, being in like a really toxic relationship because you're so in love and you're so involved, you can't see the outside picture, but somebody from the outside can see, that's not right. That's abusive.
Yeah.
That's unhealthy. And, they'll be able to give you their perspective. And it's just, yeah, a lot of people hate it when saying it's not personal, but yeah. And then I can also think of it as a care leaver or a former
Mhm.
looked after child, and I'm like, this is you know I'm a product of my environment. Just because
Mhm.
I was removed from an abusive household does not mean that I'm in a safe place. I'm going to feel safe, that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So it's like, so many different perspectives I can see it from, but yeah, interesting.
This is the thing though, isn't it? It informs and as a care leaver and stuff, it's so difficult. And obviously children don't have that same ability to reflect, to be able to, we're all guilty of interpreting behavior negatively and centralistically. So, when you're teaching, you said you do lecturing and things like that. If you see somebody on one of your lectures yawning, when you first started lecturing, I should imagine you experienced that element of, am I boring them? Oh no, I'm not good at this. Oh, this is terrible. Because you
Yeah.
interpreted it potentially negatively and about you. Now you've been doing it for a while, you might kind of recognize something personal. They probably didn't sleep very well last night. It's the first lecture of the morning, and therefore they're
Mm,
always like this. They're not used to sitting so long. It is a bit stuffy in here. Somebody over there yawned. I didn't catch them, but they caught it. Um, and you realize that it is nothing personal. But
mm,
we're all guilty of that at the moment. And for children in care, obviously they don't have, when a baby's crying and nobody comes to meet its need, it isn't going, maybe that's because mum's really struggling. It
mm,
starts to build the core concepts of it's because I'm unloved and I'm unlovable and I'm bad. So those core concepts and those core beliefs are going to start to permeate your entire persona. And it's so hard to then rewind back in time. So the reason I'm in care is not because my parents really struggled and they were not able to look after themselves and let alone look after me, and it was probably the best thing for me as far as my well-being is concerned. Any young child is going to go, it must be because I was bad, because
mm,
I was unlovable, because I'm rejectable. um and it's easy to look back in hindsight when you've then got a fully developed and fully kind of cognitive brain to kind of go, yeah, that wasn't true. But at the moment, it's very, very hard to separate that. But we all find that really hard in the moments of high agitation. I say that person who bumps into you and doesn't say sorry, we take it personally. You see an old friend walking towards you in the street, and before they get to you, they cross over the road without saying hello. And our first thought might be, what have I done wrong? Rather
mm.
than, oh, they just got stuff in their mind and they just didn't see me. It is such a hard thing to do, as you rightly said, especially for individuals who are in that vulnerable state of life, as far as childhood's concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that you're an author and
Hmm.
also an educator.
Hmm.
So tell me a bit about your book.
I can show you. I've always had one to hand at the moment because it's my pride and joy. So this is my book. It's called Targeting the Positive with Behaviours That Challenge, and it's empathic strategies for working with children and adults. So it is quite a tome. There's quite a lot to it, but it is, yeah, it's I would say a 25-year passion project. It's finally come to fruition. Always wanted to write a book, and when things happened in 2020 when we weren't able to go out for a while, rather than sitting and sunbathing, I ended up sitting and dictating an entire book into a PowerPoint presentation and then sending that over to somebody to turn it into the written word, and then spent 2 years doing that. So it kind of was a brain dump, essentially, of all the stuff that I'd picked up on and learned over the years and formulated. Yeah.
I have a question. I don't know. I feel like I don't know if you will find it offensive or not, because I know some people that will.
Okay.
But I do apologize if it comes across that way, but it's not. But does it have pictures inside of it?
It does. Yes,
Oh, okay.
it does. It kind of looks textbooky, but yeah, I got a graphic designer to do some kind of slightly friendlier stuff. So there is some stuff in there and some nice pictures and stuff. But it is what is in there is an awful lot of case studies and things like that. So a lot of people that I've met over my experience and my life, I've kind of gone into the book a little bit, named shame to protect the innocent and things like that. But sometimes it's an amalgamation of different characters and stuff that I've encountered to kind of help people to understand why people act the way they do, or give us a better insight.
But I love the cover.
It's
Honestly, love.
beautiful, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Like if I saw it in a bookshelf, I'd definitely buy it.
Yeah. You
Wow.
definitely pick it up. I'm very impressed with the cover. I had nothing to do with the cover. The inside might be rubbish, but the cover looks really good. So yeah, the publishers put that together and they sent a few over and they didn't quite get it right. And then that one came back and I fell in love. I thought that they've got it. That's spot on. That's exactly the kind of imagery I'd like.
Yeah. And I feel like it's just engaging. It's colorful, it's engaging. It's like, oh,
Mm, yeah.
what inspired you to translate your expertise in behavioral analysis into an accessible resource um, for a broader audience? And what impact do you hope the work will have?
One of the reasons that I kind of wrote the book, there's a couple of reasons. There's one that kind of a selfish reason, which is I wanted to leave a legacy. I wanted to leave something behind that mattered and maybe made a difference, to be remembered in some way, in a tiny insignificant way. That, you know, even if it's just on my son's bookcase, for instance, and it's just a case of that'll always be there for him, or maybe the grandchildren, and if he ever has kids and things like that. So, you know, it's something to leave behind. Was I always wanted to write a book. The reason that I chose this particular topic, one of the reasons I moved into education, because I felt I could make more of a difference teaching a group of 12 people what I knew than rather than just doing it myself. I felt that was more impactful. I felt like I kind of recognized some things that people were making overly complicated that I kind of just maybe could see something that was important, and I really enjoyed passing that information. And I think so it just becomes a little bit, well, how can I meet more people than just 12 in a room? Well, then I try and build my training company, and then it reaches the point of then doing like the podcast and reaching out in that kind of way, and then going, well, how else can I reach more people and tell them stuff? Well, then a book is the next thing. I don't think I've got many more routes to go. So that's kind of the end of it, maybe. Unless I'm going to have a movie made about
Technology
mine,
is
I don't think
losing
that'd be
too.
good enough. Nobody would watch that. So, so yeah, I think it was that. It was trying to do work once, but making a difference many, if that makes sense. That probably feels the best way of describing it.
It definitely does make sense. Can you share with us one of the most memorable career highlights? Um, you know, yeah, it doesn't have to be a specific aspect of your career. There's a lot going on.
There is, yeah.
Anywhere in general that
Yeah.
just sticks in your mind. Something that keeps you going.
Something that keeps me going. Um, there's one that's happened recently, which was the opening of the box that contained those books. I did share it on social media. I was quite emotional. Yeah, I was teary-eyed because it was something that felt like it was something that felt like, do you know what, you've actually done something here, done something worthwhile. And it was something off my kind of tick bucket list that felt impactful. Um, the other side though is weirdly, it was probably when I took on my first ever employee, um, was something that felt very, very meaningful to me. I have a I know I'm never going to be rich because I like employing people too much. So if I could, because employees cost money, and there is things that I could potentially do where I like I feel an incredible sense of pride, knowing that I help other people to put food on their table. That really, so within my business planning, I do have your kind of typical kind of financial targets, I suppose, but I also have like targets of ideally how I would like 100 employees, and that's not a bragging thing. It's not to have a massive company. It's because I would like to be proud enough. I'd like to have 100 people that I help to put food on their table, or I help them. And it isn't just putting food on the table. Anybody who's worked with me, I try and I think it's a famous Richard Branson quote, which is. I'll train you so you could get any job you ever wanted, but I'll treat you well enough that you never want to leave. And I've always tried to kind of emulate that a little bit, going, I want you to, whoever's leaving this job. So we've got somebody close to me leaving soon, but she's going on to a job that she really loves. She started from what she perceives as a lowly care worker, and now she's kind of become a manager and got quite a high level of reputation and stuff because we've guided her through the process, and she's done amazing. She's put all the hard work in, but it was amazing just to be able to provide that opportunity. So they're the kind of specific work ones. The other ones that are around teaching, and I'm sure you get this sometimes as well, being an educator, is just when you know you've made a difference to somebody's perception, mindset, or life. That somebody coming up to you at the end of a course, or somebody just sending you an email later and going, that was really helpful. I was going through a tough time and that's made a real difference. Or I really enjoyed that. That's it. Because hey, we can't always say that we enjoy every part of every day of every life. So even just if my course wasn't boring enough for them to kind of go, hey, that was quite good fun and I learned stuff and I enjoyed it, then especially for people who've come from school where it was horrific and they hated it, and then they come into a classroom. I get that with a lot with individuals with a diagnosis of ADHD, where they're panicking about coming into the classroom because they know, like, and I've had a number of people with ADHD who kind of gone, oh, I usually hate this kind of stuff, but you were really interesting. It's partly because I don't stop and I talk at 100 miles an hour, and therefore if you don't keep up, you'll know you'll miss something. So yeah, I keep you interested. So yeah, stuff like that is also, it's hard to pick a one. I hope that's okay. I feel like I went around
Yeah,
that.
yeah, more one is great. Like I think you're definitely right. It's like when people when people make the effort to come
Mm.
to you after your day of teaching or your training, even in the moment, I'm like, this is I feel not like when people compliment you, you're like,
Yeah, yeah.
but at the same time, just to hear that somebody enjoyed the training
Hmm.
or benefited, or they're going to take it into their like line of work as a practice, or keep it into mind when they qualify for the full psychologist or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like that burnout alleviates a little
Mm.
bit. It's like this is all worth it.
Yeah.
This is what I want. I want people to have different experiences from me. And it's just an amazing feeling. And it just motivates you to just keep on going.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't think anything can beat that. Like it's just you feel like you're going on cloud nine for the next few hours. Like it's just
It is a huge sense of an element of validation that, yeah, that what you're doing is has impacted on somebody's life, changed their mind, just got them to think for just a second, or feel something. People will forget what you say, but people remember how you make them feel. So if they're walking away with a positive feeling, then that's yeah, you've impacted on their day in a positive way.
you spoke about resonating with your audience.
Mhm.
What topics or themes do you find that resonates most with people, and why do you think they're particularly compelling?
So I teach, I think my list is about 250 different courses. So it does vary quite a lot from course to course. So if I'm teaching something along the lines of first aid, then sometimes it's about hey, this might be a really important and useful skill that I could save somebody's life, and it's better to know it. Um, if it's moving and handling, hopefully they get to think about, I probably ought to look after my back, shouldn't I? So there's sometimes different things. My main passion around things like attachment trauma and neurodiversity, but behavior as a whole is kind of the understanding of people. Um, I find it I find it fascinating, but I think most people find it fascinating to some degree or another, and giving them some kind of insight into how other people see the world. I think we always sometimes when we're in our busy day to day, and I think maybe modern society worse than ever before, we struggle to necessarily empathize. We struggle to see ourselves in others. We struggle to necessarily be able to put ourselves in other people's shoes and see the world through their eyes. So they're the moments where I can see the cognitive dissonance in people's faces sometimes when they realize that some of their actions may not have been in line with that empathic mode of putting themselves in that other person's shoes. And it just makes them feel uncomfortable for a moment. Not long term, but makes them feel uncomfortable for a moment. I think we're all guilty of saying something to somebody that we know we shouldn't have in hindsight, or doing something that maybe wasn't nice or kind. It felt right at the time for us. We shouldn't be judged for that, but it's more than likely because we were struggling to necessarily empathize with another human being in that moment. Um, so they're the kind of bits that feel particularly important, um, and make a real difference to a session.
In your view,
Yeah.
um, how does behavior analysts
Mhm.
differ from other approaches to understanding human behavior, and what unique insights does it offer in comparison?
So the idea, I mean, behavior analysis, I just refer to myself that so my specialism is behavior, and I do analyze behavior a lot. One of the things, the difference, because my approach is different, it's an amalgamation of different models that I've learned over the last 19 years of kind of studying it. So from applied behavioral analysis to your person-centered, positive behavioral support, over to the therapeutic parenting models and the PACE models and things like that. Um, and then trauma recovery models and all sorts. And I never claim to have come up with anything new. I've purely amalgamated different ideas from different people. But one of the things I noticed as a common thread, because I also had worked and taught in settings ranging from foster care to elderly dementia, and therefore there's different models in different settings. But I noticed there was a bit of a common thread, some golden rules, which seem to apply pretty universally. And I think this I definitely am stealing this from somewhere, but I don't know 100% where it came from. But one of the approaches that I kind of try and apply is what I'd class as positive, common sense approach parenting that you'd apply to a younger child, but apply to anybody.
Hmm.
So most of us don't. If you think of a baby, if a baby cries, a positive, secure parent who is emotionally and psychologically resilient, all the caveats, is going to go in and try to understand why that baby's crying. They're not going to try and correct the baby's behavior. They're going to try and understand the need, the function of the behavior, what the baby's feeling in that particular moment. Suddenly, you then shift expectations around the person, and that's where we then start to focus on the behavior rather than the person.
Hmm.
And that's what I kind of find, like we all know what we should be doing because most of us will do it automatically with a newborn. So why does that change? Um, like most of us don't. If you're potty training a child, you don't focus on how can I stop them from messing in their nappy. I focus on how can I teach them how to use the potty. We focus automatically on the behavior we want rather than the behavior we don't want. But again, we just seem to lose that somewhere along the line. And it's all to do with managing our own expectations, our own values, beliefs, attitudes, and schemas. So that's probably where my approach is different. The analytical part of things is, well, we should be analytical because we should be curious. We should be fascinated, not frustrated. We should be interested, not irritated with anybody.
Yeah. So one thing that, it's I think there's an expectation, like, if we just focus on children and young people, or those with, okay, if we focus on people with fluctuating needs, I
Mm-hmm.
think that's people would be like, well, they're fine most of the time. They're so high function. They're so this. They're so that. But
Yes.
I'm like, they're masking the best they can and trying to survive the best they can. And when you see them, getting distressed or dysregulated, you're like, calm down, whatever. And you're trying to fix the situation, like fix the behavior, then
Yeah.
understanding what is triggering, this intense feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I agree with you when, I've said this previously as well, you know, people are more understanding with babies. And then when it comes to like, or until you're really, really old and and you have similar needs to a newborn,
Mm.
when people have to help you much more,
Yeah.
support you and stuff like that. I think between those two phases, people become less empathetic, less curious, less able to see things from a wider perspective. And I think it's wrong for people to expect people to react a certain way if you do not teach them
Mm-hmm.
how to cope, how to manage these, let's just say if it's emotional dysregulation, how to manage their
Mm-hmm.
emotions. It's like it's like a baby, you breastfeed them in the beginning or give them a bottle, and then you give them soft foods, that's all puree, and then you move on to like things that are cut up, and then bigger food.
Mm-hmm.
It's a journey, but from us, like I think it's like usually 6, 7 till around like, I don't know, like 65, they expect something else from you.
Mm.
That process, that learning thing never stops. Yeah.
Mm. It
Well,
is so that's why I was the potty training is a great kind of analogy for it because most parents have gone through that journey at some point of trying to potty train a child. But you set your expectations based on what the child can actually do. So there's no point in trying to potty train a child if they either can't communicate or they don't have the mobility to actually go to the toilet themselves, because they're not going to succeed. So you don't set them up to fail. You teach them how to walk. You teach them how to undress themselves or dress themselves, how to actually lift the lid of the toilet, things like that. You also recognize most younger children, they don't know they need the loo to start off with, so you as a caregiver have to be hyper vigilant on that and notice when they're jiggling in front of Paw Patrol to kind of go, hey, let's redirect you, let's go and use a bottle, let's go and use a toilet, and give you the chance to succeed. Not because, so if they make a mess, they're not doing it on purpose, they're still learning, they're still not figuring it yet. And that's really in what you mentioned there about the emotional dysregulation side of things. How am I meant to manage my emotions if I don't recognize them in the first place? How am I meant to be potty trained if I don't know when I need the toilet? Now, whether my ability to recognize my own emotions is down to sensory processing issues and the fact that, I have a difference in the way that I process interoception information, or whether it be down to it's never been taught to me properly, or I've been in a heightened state of arousal, a dysregulated state for so long that I haven't needed to understand any of the other emotions. Therefore, I need somebody to teach me. Just because I'm now 15 doesn't mean I don't still need teaching. Just because I'm now whatever, it doesn't change just because, well, you should have learned this by now. Well, I didn't. For whatever reasons, whether it's because I couldn't or I wasn't taught it or I learned inappropriate ways to manage it, I need to be taught now. And that's kind of going into what you said there as far as the shifting perspective. The expectations are a massive factor related to that.
absolutely. And that function, I feel like it's important to understand, something served a function once before
Mm-hmm.
and to acknowledge that and understand that. And,
Yeah.
it might not serve a function it might seem like there's no need for it to serve a function now, but clearly it does until
Mm,
we go out other ways. Earlier, you brought up neurodivergence.
mhm.
So, how does neurodivergence, play a part in this?
I think it's incredibly complex. I think that we as human beings love to put things into categories because that's how we learn and manage the world around us efficiently. So I'm looking at a white flat top with four legs, and therefore I know it's a table. And I needed to kind of know this categorical learning of the fact that that's a table just to be able to navigate what I can put things on, what I should be sitting on, and what I should be putting things on. So there is an element of the way that we learn and understand the world is through categories. I think sometimes then we make the mistake of trying to push that too far and put people into boxes when people don't really like fitting into boxes, which is where we've moved more effectively of understanding the spectrum of neurodivergence and all the offshoots from that. As far as but I think there is such a interconnection between things like trauma and attachment and neurodivergence and is recognized and still, contentious, and still people are exploring it. And I don't in any way claim to know the answers.
Mm.
But for me, if we've got an individual who's, for whatever reason, brain works slightly differently, their experiences of the world from a very young age are going to be slightly different. So I've met many parents, later on they find their child is neurodivergent in some way, who kind of will describe it like, let's say that they end up being diagnosed on the autistic spectrum, for instance, and then they kind of go, well, they were such an easy baby, never really cried. In fact, they didn't even like me picking them up. Well, if this child, let's say, experiences sensory processing issues, but doesn't have the what we might class as typical forms of innate communication or understanding, or doesn't engage in processing information in what we might consider to be a typical way, well, it maybe the baby's quiet because it doesn't understand that communication need. Doesn't mean it doesn't want the attention; it doesn't know how to communicate it. Is it a case of it doesn't like being picked up because mum's soft touch on the skin actually feels painful? And therefore, if you've got a parent who's going, my baby never cries, in fact, they don't even like me picking him up, we have to kind of recognize that it isn't instinctive to then try and connect more. The instinct might be to kind of go to connect less. Well, I make sure that they're, fed and changed and stuff systematically, but otherwise they don't really want me. So then you're getting very confused messages of somebody who potentially wants connection, but doesn't know how to communicate it, or the connection they get is potentially painful from the baby's point of view, which is then going to affect their whole perception as far as attachments are concerned. So I don't know quite how you can completely separate those up, because we know that then, attachment difficulties or inconsistent parenting or neglect or whatever it is, however it, the extremes of, but is then going to impact as far as those developmental trauma aspects are concerned. So I think it is so interwoven that I haven't figured out how some people are separating it up. That's the best way. That's the best way I'll put it.
For those who are separating it up,
Mhm.
what questions would you ask them to kind of understand that thought process?
What, as far as so people who are labeling and things like that, do you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, in a way where it's just categorizing things.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
think
just,
there's some people who are moving away from it, but one of the things is that, and I've heard this from a few, and then there's bits and I'm still processing what I agree with and what I don't. I do not have a fixed idea. I have some ideas. I don't have beliefs. I tend to because it's all based on new evidence. Um, but there is some people we have to recognize that a lot of the diagnostical criteria, whether it be the DSM or whether it be the ICD,
very
they are, say again, sorry.
very deficit based.
Absolutely, very deficit based and very much based on the medical model, in the fact that let's look at what behaviors fit into this particular category that we can give a label to. So then potentially we can either offer some form of solution to the problem. That's what they're designed for. They are, as you said, very deficit based. But they needed to kind of categorize. But when you read kind of the DSM, obviously a lot of it is kind of here are the things that might help you to recognize this particular condition. And here are the things that you need to rule out it isn't, to then give you that. But that's still limited. And if you look at how it's changed over the years from DSM-1 to DSM-5, for instance, and the amount of additional diagnoses are in there and some taken away and things like that, it's an ever-growing experience. So although I kind of I get why they do, because again, the nature of human behavior is the categorical thinking, but also how do you solve a problem if you see it as a problem, if you haven't defined the problem yet? So if I'm looking at this table and it's wobbly, but I haven't figured out that one of the legs isn't working properly, then I wouldn't know how to fix a table. That's the nature of human beings and the way that we approach life. It doesn't mean it's right. It's just the way that we tend to approach life. So I think that's very much the case of how the medical model then impacts or is how we see people. You mentioned it earlier as well. Like, so I've had some real challenges with my mental health over the years. I've been through some very difficult and dark times. And one of the things that I've spoken about to people about some very people close to me. In fact, I'll be honest, as far as so I spoke to my parents about it because they found out later on I'd been going through a really difficult time. And they said, why didn't you come and tell us? And I said, because you'd want to try and solve it, because you'd want to know what was wrong and you'd want to try and make it better, because you're human, because you love me, because you care. It's not coming from a bad place. But the problem is that's fine if something has caused the mental health problem, being, I've lost a job or a relationship breakdown. But when nothing seems to make sense, it seems can be completely irrational why I'm experiencing this distress, this emotional dysregulation, this depression. There isn't a reason that I can figure out. You then trying to solve it makes me feel guilty and ashamed that there isn't a reason. So it makes me feel worse, not better. Now, I know they're coming from the position of, but we want to make it better. We want to solve the problem. But this is the importance of empathy. I'm not ready for you to solve the problem because I don't know what the problem is. I just need to feel human connection. I just need to be understood. I just need to be accepted unconditionally for how I am right now before we start moving into that, before I feel ready to move into that. And I think that's the nature of exactly what we do with all the medical model as far as, the neurodivergent conditions and stuff like that. But that might be controversial. So we'll see how that goes.
But I think the one thing is, I feel like it's as humans, I agree with you, we do need human connections, but as from since we were monkeys or whatever, everything was, there's a problem, you need to problem solve it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I feel like as humans, they often associate this with people with trauma or neurodivergence because it looks more obvious. But I feel like as humans in general, we cannot sit still with our problems at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's, and I feel like because people react, out of the norm, like I know if I'm unable to solve a problem, I might start banging my hand against my chin, might start pulling my hair out. It's more obvious of signs of distress, while other people might start fidgeting discreetly or just shuffle or whatever they would do. But you can't sit with it. It's like, I need to fix it, and it's like, it's okay. I don't know what's going on. You just take a step back. We don't really need to fix it. I just want to talk about it. It's like when you talk to your friends, you're like, I know I'm in the wrong, but I just want to, run. I just want to get this off my chest. But I know what I'm doing is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I need to offload. I don't want you to say anything. I don't want you to do anything.
Yeah.
I just want to say my piece, and then we'll forget about this and move.
And that's one of the best lines for things like the principle of de-escalation and things like that, or general human connection. It is so simple, which is, if I'm approaching you and you seem distressed, making sure that I clarify, do you want help? Do you want a hug? Or do you want to be heard? They're the kind of three that potentially you need. You either need me to do something to make this better. You just need to be hugged and held and empathized with and connected with and just made to feel safe. Or you want to vent, you want to rant, you want to kind of just offload a little bit. And so many of us, when we're connecting with other people, whether whether it be a friend or a family member or something like that, we see they're in distress and we go in and we immediately go into one of those going, oh, and maybe I don't want a hug. Maybe I just need to vent right now because I'm not willing to accept, or I can't cope with the connection and attachment. Or it makes me feel like hugging can sometimes take a person's permission to feel the feelings they're feeling,
Mm,
because I'm hugging you to stop you from crying, but I need to cry because I'm experiencing pain. So I don't want that taken away right now. That's the inability, again, as you just mentioned very rightly, that we struggle to just sit with the pain or sit with the bad thoughts and stuff. And I think we're worse in modern society than we ever have been as well,
mm,
at the inability to sit with the feelings, because it is so easy. I think it was a book, actually. I think it's called The Dopamine Nation. I think it's called that, which talks about exactly that we're constantly, rather than just being able to sit with our feelings and our thoughts, we then immediately go, well, how can I remove these by dopamine hit? I'll pick up my phone when I'm bored for a second. I'll engage with other people or talk to other people or go and do something that's a high dopamine hit straight away when I'm feeling sad, to try and overcome it, rather than processing
mm.
anything that we're doing. And because we've got so much access to high dopamine hits in the world around us, it definitely prevents us maybe from doing that. Once upon a time, we potentially would have had to walk however many miles to go and talk to that person. Now we just pick up the phone to
Yeah.
get a hit. Yeah.
I feel like because everything is so instant,
Yes.
I think there's a need for instant solutions in people's lives.
Hmm.
It's not a need, it's a want of instant solutions. And I think that's when it becomes difficult because there's some things that you can't solve
Hmm.
immediately.
Yeah.
Like there's something, whether it's time or whether it's like, I'll wait until I see this person next time, whatever it may be. I think the fact that it's not instant creates so much anxiety now because, like you said, we can call anyone whenever we want. We could
Hmm.
send an email and, approach someone very same day. You order food, it's gonna be there within half an hour. Like
Hmm.
everything is so instantaneous. When something is not, I feel like people cannot cope with it.
Hmm.
And I think, and the thing is, I wouldn't say it's a generational thing because I think it affects everyone, not a specific generation. But I think it's an issue of what we're climatized to.
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
think it's something, I think when a person is required to slow down, it's more anxiety provoking. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
get?
Yeah. There's a comedian who kind of does a bit about, like, talking about mindfulness. Again, I can never remember names or anything like that, but um, he talks about, we didn't used to have mindfulness. We used to be called boredom. When I was on a train, I wasn't looking at my phone. I was watching the drip from the condensation go down the window for an hour, because that's all I
Mm,
had. So there is that, as you said, that I think we struggle to delay gratification. I think there's an awful lot of things out there as far as modern technology which allows that instant gratification. But this is where I think there's so much challenge in the world, or one of the factors that contributes to the challenge for many, especially young people, that they've been raised in this instant gratification world, that you don't have to wait until birthday or Christmas or a special event to get that thing now, because more than likely we'll just buy it tomorrow because it's just on Amazon, it gets delivered straight away. Far more likely to just get stuff as and when. I want to speak to you now, so therefore you've got a phone and those sorts of things. Um, so there is this. They've been raised from a very young age within this almost instant dopamine hit or this instant gratification. But then things like the educational system are built to completely the opposite to that. That you've
mm,
got to sit in something you're not enjoying. You've got to go home and do some more of what you're not enjoying. And delay gratification of doing the things that are fun and going on the Xbox and getting a high dopamine hit to get a good job when you're in your 20s. Um, and that I think that means that my habits are there. Either I'm able to do that, but I'm having to work really, really, really hard to do it, and I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself to be able to do it, which is not going to be good for my emotional well-being. Or I can't do it, which is going to destroy my self-esteem because I'm being
Mm.
compared against those who can. And I think that's really, I think, I don't know, have you ever heard of the Stanford marshmallow test? Have you ever heard
Is
of
that when
that?
you put it in front of a baby and give
Yeah,
up an
yeah, a young
interpretation?
child. Yeah, you can either have one now or you can wait till two. Wait 15 minutes and then you can have two. It's such a fascinating study about delaying gratification, and when they've done it longitudinally, so looking over a person's entire lifespan, the children who were able to wait for the second marshmallow tended to have higher paid jobs, better education, and had better lasting relationships.
Quick question.
Um, Say again, sorry.
Quick question.
Yeah, of course.
So how long did this experiment? I know of it because it's been it's been quite popularized.
Yes.
But how long did this thing take for them to be like, oh yeah, they ended up getting a high paid job? How long is this experiment?
Well, so longitudinal studies are looking over the lifespan of when the experiment was originally done, and then they kind of map the life of the child as they then got older. So it's yeah, so it's comparable. So they keep the data on the individuals, and then later on they catch up with them again and see, so how are you doing now? And that's where the comparison is. But there were some really interesting things about it as well. So, for instance, they did a variation of the experiment where the child could ring a bell and then they could bring the experimenter back. And what they found is that when there was trust built, when the child rang the bell and the experimenter did return immediately, the child was better able to delay gratification. When they rang the bell and nobody came back, the trust was lower and therefore they were more likely to then eat the first marshmallow.
Mm,
So straight away, as far as the ability to delay gratification, whether there's a risk of scarcity, I'm more likely to eat the marshmallow straight away.
mm,
Yeah, some really. There's another wonderful book which is Hunters in a Farmer's World, which is a comparison or a kind of a theory around ADHD, which is the hunter would eat the marshmallow straight away because I don't know when I'm going to get another marshmallow. The
mm,
farmer will wait for the two marshmallows. And we are obviously the agricultural revolution meant that farmers are societally more important as far as provision of food's concerned from our ancestry. But as far as the hunter once upon a time is really important. So if you compare kind of I need to quickly shift my attention from that rabbit to that pig that just ran past me because I've got a better chance of being able to catch that. And so this sudden ability to either hyper focus on a particular hunt or shift their attention very, very quickly. The need to, I'm going to eat that now because it'd be rotten tomorrow. And there's loads of animals in this field. So I'm going to eat as many as I can or hunt as many as I can rather than necessarily waiting and until tomorrow. It's quite an interesting theory around ADHD. And yeah, it's a really interesting book.
mm. Definitely like I like the analogy of the hunter and the farmer.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of things that we spoke about can really be applied to anything to do with trauma informed practice.
Hmm.
It's very much what's the word? Applicable?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, that's what. Um, how does trauma awareness enhances our understanding of behavior, particularly in recognizing the impact of adverse um experiences on individuals' behavior and well-being?
I think the simplest and easiest way of explaining that is when we're trying to understand behavior, there's kind of, it used to be just two questions we'd ask, and then we just need to introduce one more. So typically we'd kind of go, what's wrong for them and what are they feeling in this moment? They're two questions that we've always asked ourselves around behavior, but then we've added just one additional one, which is, and what might have happened in their past that could be in the moment? So they're now the three questions. What's wrong for them? What are they feeling? Or what might have happened in their past that could be informing in the present? And that's the simplest way of kind of referring to it, just that one little add-on that it may not be something that's now that's easy to perceive for us. It could be something that's happened in their past or an experience from their past. There's a great analogy, which is the invisible lion. An author called Ben something wrote it, I believe. And the invisible lion is, if you saw somebody running down the street looking terrified, you'd potentially think them crazy until you saw the lion chasing them. But trauma is the invisible lion. It still feels completely real for the person who's experiencing it, just because we can't see it and we can't experience it. So I kind of concept. So that's where we're kind of just adding on that. So I use an example, for instance, like, okay, I'll give an example that I often use when I'm kind of teaching. So let's say I'm out with a partner that I'm particularly fond of. It's I think it's going to be a long-term relationship. She's the one. Okay, we're on a night out. I'm genuinely invested in this relationship. But I go to the bar, and when I turn back, she's talking to another man. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, is that actually a risk to my well-being? Well, we might say, well, it's not definitely going to kill me, so it's not a 10. But is it a 0? Well, he could be really charming. He could be good looking. He could be stealing her away, but he could also be her cousin or a friend, or there's no ill intent or whatever. So, and even if she was to leave me, I would be emotionally affected, but only maybe for a short period of time. So on a scale of 1 to 10, we might say the risk to my well-being of her talking to another man is maybe 1, maybe 2 max, right? But then that information, the logical information, enters my brain and then hits my baggage, my insecurities, my core belief, my previous experiences, my losses, my traumas, whatever it is. And suddenly that then gets mixed up, and suddenly it's definitely going to happen, and it's definitely death. Okay, or it's definitely harm. So rationally, I'm going, it's a 1. There's no risk. But emotionally, it's coming out as a 7, let's say. Okay. Now, anybody else looking on is going to be going, what you mess about? You've been ridiculous. It's a 2. So rationally, I'm very aware that I know it's a 2. It's this stupid. I know I'm being ridiculous. It's like a phobia of spiders, isn't it? It doesn't matter how many times people tell me, oh, I know it's a spider. I know it can't hurt me logically. It doesn't make me any less scared. The emotional reaction is still very real. So we've got that. So at the other end is this emotional reaction. So most of us can relate to something along those lines. So let's say that I've got a child in my household who's experienced, abuse or domestic abuse. And all I do is I just shout upstairs and go, "Oi, tea's ready." Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, there is no risk. Okay. It's a case of, well, maybe I am angry. Maybe I might got really angry and harm, but it's highly unlikely based on all previous experiences. And the level of threat is probably going to be, he's not going to kill me or anything like that. But when we're hitting old previous experiences and baggage and all of that kind of thing, the core beliefs and what we think we deserve and all that sort of stuff, what's now coming out the other side? So this is where then for families sometimes are going, he kicked off for no reason. All he did is shout him upstairs for tea. Well, no, there was a very real reason for him, but it wasn't what you were doing. It was from things that had experienced in the past. And unfortunately, your behavior is close enough to just trigger that emotional response, that threat in him.
I think I think often, being in foster care, being in residential care, and been in the sort of in a semi-independent for a short while as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think the level of understanding of trauma is low, is
Yes.
very, very, very low. And when they
Mm-hmm.
see a reaction to whatever's happened, they blow it out of proportion. I'm like, it is proportionate to what, the threat they
The
sorry, the
feelings are
threat
real, even if the threat isn't.
yeah.
So many people who are working in either foster care or children's homes, they struggle to recognize this. They, again, I suppose you're getting back to what I first said, wasn't it? Personalizing
Yeah.
it, or
Yeah.
they make assumptions about that behavior, or they label, as I use the term kicking
Yeah.
off, for instance, which I think should be banned other than on a football pitch. Because it's, again, but it's our ingrained expectations of how we think a person should and shouldn't react and should and shouldn't behave in any given circumstance, which means that we're not engaging our empathy and our curiosity at that point. I think if I paraphrased you in where you were going, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
It's all right.
I think the role of, trauma-informed language, like you just mentioned, like kicking off, hey, that or somebody's aggressive. Are they aggressive or are they frustrated?
Yeah.
Two very different things. And it just looks different. Like autism is a spectrum, anger is a spectrum, you know,
Yes.
things display very differently depending on people's experiences, their age, and other varying factors. I think it's so discouraging for children and young people, especially for those who are in care, to work with people that are their carers or
Mhm.
support workers, whoever they are, because of the way that people react. And it's like those people go on about the trauma informed principles,
Mhm.
and I'm like, but you don't follow them. These are little, but even if you do follow them, these are just small little stepping stones.
Yeah.
It needs to be consistent. It needs to be, you need to be doing more than that. You know, you need to make an effort. Just knowing about the principles is just not good enough.
So this is I kind of one of the things I noticed, and it is we have to be kind of we have to apply the principles that we're applying, trauma informed,
Mm.
universally. And I think there's a challenge that all of us experience where we focus where that trauma informed kind of mentality should go to. So let's say I reverse the scenario I gave you a second ago, that I shout upstairs, I go, tea's ready. This then, unfortunately, triggers this lad into a hyper aroused state, and he acts out in a way that is antisocial or potentially hazardous. Okay. Um, I then react to that behavior. However, what if my previous experiences of aggressive people and people throwing things and people lashing things and throwing shouting things is from my childhood where I experienced trauma? Where does the loop end? So the instinct is, but you should be looking after the traumatized kids. There's a lot of workers in the care system that have experienced their own trauma, their own thing. They've never dealt with them, never been had any support to deal with them, but then they're supposed to then emotionally manage and regulate themselves to then help somebody else to emotionally regulate and manage themselves. So therefore, we're creating this bit of a challenge. So we have to kind of look at it two-pronged approach, that it can't just the organization as a whole doesn't just need to go, staff, you need to be better. The organization as a whole should be going, staff, we need to make sure you're okay,
Mm.
because you need to be okay to help these kids to be okay, who are going to act out in ways to trigger or try and cause you to not be okay because that's what they think they deserve or what they're used to, or feels more safe and comfortable to them because of their previous experiences. The more buttons you've got, the more individuals will push them, because it's a control thing. It helps them to feel safe. It doesn't make them happy, but it can help them to feel safe. um and that's where sometimes there is a focus on one side, but it actually needs to be both sides.
Yeah.
If I can't control my own emotions, how am I supposed to be able to control any situation or keep people safe? If I can't, how can I co-regulate if I can't be regulated? So there always needs to be that kind of almost feedback loop of all, and this is why it's so important, and why when I did my model, that it should always be self-reflected, not just reflected on the child. So I've got what's called a 6-stage target model, which is what the book's about, and it's just a simple analytical process basically. So we identify the behavior, we try and understand or empathize with the behavior, we create a proactive plan, we recognize escalation, we respond appropriately, and then we learn from the incident. They're the 6 phases. But I always say that it's so important that staff should be doing about themselves, not just about the young person or the adult or the elderly person, whichever it is. I've done it, I've had a lad in my household who shouted at me, and I know that I raised my voice back, and in reflection, I knew it was the wrong thing to do. It caught me by surprise, because emotions do sometimes. It caught me by surprise. But obviously, I've then potentially caused some damage to that kid in the fact that, triggered potentially past events and all sorts of things. That's a terrible shame and guilt that, I then had to deal with. But it's really important that I then self-reflect and I go, okay, Why did that behavior get to me? Why did that really trigger me? Why did that wind me up? And a common would be because I can remember this one particular situation when I was reflecting on it, and the outcome that I came to was, if I'd have spoken to my dad in the way that kid just spoke to me, my dad would have reacted exactly the way that I just did. Now, it doesn't mean my dad's a bad man. It also doesn't make him right. So I need to reflect on that and go, okay, so I need to be better. It doesn't mean I'm not good enough. It just means I need to be better. And what am I going to do next time? And this is where then I go into my proactive plan again. He's going to do that again. He's going to try and trigger that reaction again, not consciously, but he'll try and trigger that reaction again. So how am I going to respond? Because that time I reacted. So how am I going to respond next time? And I need to go through that journey myself exactly the same. And that's where the kind of thing, I think that's where sometimes certain organizations fall short, that they put all the focus on the staff should be trauma informed. And actually the entire organization needs to be trauma informed.
I definitely, I think it's this is one thing that I do believe in, is I feel like you cannot expect your staff or people to react a certain way if you're not modeling that behavior and the expectations are not the same throughout. I think people who work in, anything to do with people, they need to be supported throughout the whole thing. From the onboarding till the moment they leave. There needs to be regular check-ins. There needs to be, you know, if you need annual leave, you recommend people to go on annual leave, because there needs to be steps that's taken to look after their well-being. Because if their well-being, I've said this to people, you can't look after yourself,
Mhm.
then you don't have the capacity to look after somebody else. So there needs to be steps taken to ensure that people's well-being is at the forefront.
Mhm.
That's way
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. A common phrase I say: to be truly selfless, you have to first be selfish. And it's completely counterintuitive because, the most famous analogy is, when a mask drops down an airplane, who do you help first, yourself or the child? And the instinct is that you should help the child, but 100% it should be helping yourself first. Get that mask on yourself first. Because if you're passing out from oxygen, a lack of oxygen, you're not going to be successful helping the child, and therefore you're both going to perish. So, but it's easier said than done, because most people, a bit like we were going on to earlier, they don't like to sit with their own feelings and explore their own feelings. They're too busy and would rather distract themselves with somebody else's, because it's painful and difficult to kind of process that. So it is so important that people are getting the appropriate support within the setting. But as you said there, and this is where the challenge, isn't it? You said, if you need annual leave, then take the annual leave. How am I meant to do that in a children's home where we've got a skeleton crew of staff anyway, and we're struggling with recruitment because nobody wants to work in it because, and this is where we've got that cycle again causing all sorts of problems. I mean, I don't want to get into the system's broken, but we all know it is. So, well, there's definitely challenges with it.
I think broken seems more accurate.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was trying to be diplomatic.
Oh, yeah.
You tried a second ago to be more diplomatic, so I thought you role modeled, so I followed suit.
Uh, yeah, that's a new one. That's an absolute new one. Yeah, I'm not very diplomatic. I just not often just say it as it is. I mean, there's sometimes I'm just like, that's just fucked.
Yeah.
Can't say. You know
That's the
when
benefit
something
of
sounds
not.
better in your head, and then you say it, and you're like, who do you think you are saying?
Yeah. Oh, 100%, which is the benefit of a podcast and not doing it live.
Oh no. Yeah, I would definitely get cancelled
Yeah.
if we were doing it live. What do you think needs to change on a systematic level for there be, because you said there needs to be a universal approach that's taken, and that
Yeah.
can't really start without a systematic
Mm.
change. What what do you think are the steps people like government or local government
Hmm.
need to take to achieve that? That's a big question, but
It is, yeah. And if I answer this, when I will share my some of my winnings from my Nobel Prize with you, because I think it is. I definitely don't think I'm a clever enough man to kind of give the answer to that. I think it is an incredibly complex economic, political kind of question, and that's one of the challenges and the problems, that it is so systemic. I think it's a change takes time. It's one of the things I teach about in behavior all the time. Change takes time, and we're still in a very slow moving process. For me, there's an entire mindset change that has to happen, and not just from the internals of an actual care home itself, but from a governmental level, as far as, like, people, we still tend to put people into two camps, which is good and bad. So bad people do bad things and they go to prison where they must be punished, which I don't think is the right approach. I don't think works. I don't think it benefits. I think, you need to look at the high rates of care experienced people that are experiencing homelessness or experiencing or in prison and things like that, to kind of show there's causation here. There's things that have happened. There's people who are feeling unsafe and therefore have acted in ways to try and make themselves feel safe that haven't necessarily been viewed as adaptive in society, or they've not been taught better, or they've, whatever the reasons are. So when I've been and tried to teach, and I got invited to go and teach what I do at a prison, and at the end, the staff were so on board. They were so on board, going, this makes so much sense. This really does. So many individuals we support do have mental health issues, do have difficulty, do have challenges. We get this, but it's never going to work. And when I kind of said, can you explain why? I said, because of powers be. It doesn't work from a systemic point of view. We can't change it, even from the inside. Now, I think that's sad. And I think there is elements that are changing. And it is kind of a bottom up, kind of slowly going. So, for instance, there is big changes that have happened in the foster care and adoption system. I'm slowly starting to see those changes really push through in children's homes. Primary schools are getting an awful lot better. Secondary schools are still nowhere near. But there does seem to be little sparks of change that are happening from the bottom up. And I think it is, as much as I'd love to go, hey, here's one big solution, I think it is individuals on a day-to-day basis acting the way that they feel is right, and being brave enough and confident enough to kind of go, this doesn't feel right. If you have a staff team within a children's home, for instance, and you have that staff member who's trying to enforce old punishment reward logic and old school thinking, that that people are going, no, we don't do that, and sticking up for it and kind of going, no. The hope would be that obviously the organization, I'm a big believer in training, because obviously I run a training company, but I do think that knowledge is absolutely key. Education, podcasts like yourself, that you're putting that information out into the world, and the talks that you do, the podcasts that I do as well. I think it is the individuals who are just trying to spread the message. It's not going to be quick, but I notice little changes. But I suppose it's a bit like growing your hair or losing weight. When you're looking at it every day, you can't see it. And it's not until like a few days down the line that we'll go, that's not different. I did when I was creating and writing this book, I obviously included people with care experience in the process for the trauma informed aspect. I'm always including individuals with lived experience from all areas when I'm kind of course creating and stuff. And I interviewed a guy who'd been in children's homes in the 80s and 90s, and some of the stories that he was telling me, and his perception of, we were just naughty kids, or we were perceived as just naughty kids that nobody else wants. Now, very few, I wouldn't say 100%, but very few of the homes and children's homes that I go and work in and teach in and things like that have anything like that perspective anymore. It's only, I think for him, it was a majority of staff saw him as a naughty kid that nobody else wants. And there was one or two staff that were empathic and understanding. But now I think it's shifted the other way, which is a good sign. So I don't know, that was a very long, I felt like a politician there, as far as I didn't really give you an answer, but I indicated it answers.
I think it's, yeah. I feel like there's a, I would argue there's like a third section where there's people who are empathetic, there's people that are not, and then there's people that are like in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
They switch depending on the reaction of the young person.
Yes.
I've had, this. I think this was last. It was last year, early last year. I was really, really distressed. I became quite, I, you know, there was some, I was got very aggressive. This person didn't get hurt. Some people did.
Yeah.
But I was getting restrained, and somebody was laughing.
Yeah.
But when it's not like a vocal laugh, it's like you're laughing, but there's no noise coming up because there's a service level manager there restraining me. There's because they were all in the house, and there was another person, and then you stick your tongue at me, and I'm like, because I know you can be different, I know you can be empathetic, but I know you can also be a bitch. Like,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
always that two sides, and the thing is, I feel like it's very, very difficult because you don't know how people can switch as well. And I feel
Mm,
like that, if a child or young person making a progress is often a setback as well if somebody reacts like that.
of course.
Yeah, and I feel like I would argue there's three sections. That's what basically I'm trying to say without waffling.
No, no, no. Yeah, you're 100% right. As far as and this is one of the challenges, isn't it? That I always say, human beings are incredibly complex. This lump of matter within our skulls is the most complex structure in the known universe. Over 100 billion individual neurons, all interconnecting between 100 and 1,000 individual synapses. It's one complicated system. So a comparable complex system is the weather. And
Mm.
even the most well-trained meteorologist still can't predict whether it's going to rain or not.
Mm.
So why are we surprised with people? Chaos effect. A butterfly flaps its wings and there's a tornado in Mexico. Same as people. That person didn't say hello to me in the same way that you usually do. That then causes a trickle effect, a ripple effect of growing and growing kind of adjustments that then cause me to feel overwhelmed and agitated with the day when I wouldn't have. And it was just because that one person didn't say hello with a smile in the same way that they usually do. Now, how can we predict that? How can we prevent that? It's almost impossible. Now, I don't want to put myself out of work here as far as understanding behavior, but I consider myself to be a semi-mediocre weatherman in the fact that I've got a better idea of how, pressure and temperature and humidity all come together to roughly kind of go, I think there might be a storm later. But I
Mm.
might mess it up on the day. It might go different. It might not go as I predicted it to go. Or it could be I tell you it's safe to go out in shorts and suddenly you're wishing you had an umbrella 5 minutes later. Um, so I'm going to get things wrong, but I think that's really difficult for a lot of people. Especially whether you and even with that level of training, I don't think it makes it easier sometimes because sometimes people do still surprise you. There's a wonderful model related to neurodiversity that somebody a neurodivergent created rather than the old triad of impairments. He created this example which was um, it's a different triad and it's kind of more positive or more social kind of model of it. And it was the need for motivation. We all need something to motivate us. Other people tend to decide what they think should motivate us, but we need a motivation. We need the need for predictability. We all need predictability, and some need it more than others do. And then cognitive imbalance, which is split skills. Like I may be this age in this area cognitively, but I may actually be functioning at a lower typical age in another area, or may have I'm really good at this, but I'm not good at this. These are the three areas that he kind of looked at, which I really liked. But that need for predictability is really normal, and I think that's a problem. People are really confusing. So if I find it even more difficult, either through previous experiences of trauma and mistrust that I find people confusing and I don't get them, or just because my brain works differently to what other people might be typical, that makes the world very confusing and very complex and a bit scary.
Great.
Well done.
Looking on our conversation, um, what do you think is the most important takeaway for our listeners?
Hmm. No, hopefully there's been a few. Hopefully there's been yeah, some bits to kind of think about, explore, or to disagree with, whichever people or direction people go. Um, I think for me, people are fascinating. Yes, they are incredibly frustrating at times, but they are fascinating. My key takeaway would always be kind of for me, one of the greatest gifts that we have in this life is to be curious, to learn, to grow, to experience. And I think it's I strongly encourage the growth mindset all the time. That I often have people on courses when I'm teaching, and it doesn't matter which environment I'm kind of teaching in, whether it be kind of elderly care or whether it be, individuals with intellectual disabilities or those living with those on the autistic spectrum or whoever. Doesn't matter the care setting. I often get people kind of coming back afterwards, kind of reflecting and going, "Oh, you've made me kind of question all my parenting." And I want them to do that. That doesn't mean they're a bad parent at any means. My son is now 24 years old. And if I
What?
could travel back in, yeah, my son's 24 years old. So I
Right.
know I'm aging well. Or yeah, haggard, whichever way you were going with that. But yeah, so, and I know, so my son's he's not biologically mine, but he is my son. Came into my life when he was 4 years old. And if I could go back in time and do things differently, there is things that I would do differently. 100%. I think I was a good parent in some ways, and I think I was a bad parent in other. Um, However, he's okay, and we're okay, and therefore I've done okay. And I think as long as I use an analogy quite often as far as like being a good manager. Like, so a good manager doesn't think they're perfect. A good manager makes massive mistakes, but a good manager has the humility and the self-esteem to recognize that their mistakes don't define them, and therefore they can learn from it and can be better tomorrow. And I think that's all I would want from anybody, as far as anything they learn from any of my podcasts, any of your podcasts, any books they read or whatever. They take it as an opportunity for growth rather than anything that could be perceived as derogatory to who they are.
Are there any upcoming projects, events, or resources you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, so we're just about to, depending on when this goes out, on November the 5th, we are relaunching our season 2 of the Able to Care podcast. We have a very special guest and a number of very special guests coming up in season 2. We're still working on 2 episodes a week, and at the same time, we're also releasing what's called the ablehub.uk, which is a membership site for paid and unpaid caregivers, teachers, and parents to better understand themselves, as well as better support and understand those that they care for. So that goes live on the 5th of November as well. So that's an exciting project. And then obviously I couldn't go without mentioning my book for only the 100th time today, I think, because I'm excited about it. That is released on the 21st of November, but it is available for pre-sale from all online bookstores. But yeah, if you do it from Amazon or Waterstones or WH Smith's, whatever. And that is in the UK, America, Australia. I think it's coming out in about 3 months, but yeah, UK and America.
What is the publishing date? I mean, what's the release date for your book, sorry?
It's the 21st of November.
Oh, okay. And where can our listeners find you or connect with you to stay up to date with your work?
So if you're interested in training, then able-training.co.uk is obviously our training website. You can search me out on andybaker.xyz as well, which is so I do business mentoring as well as obviously the speaking engagements and things like that all go through there. Or the Able to Care podcast. So it's available on all podcast forums and YouTube as well. So yeah, search us out there. So they've got 2 podcasts to listen to, yours and mine. So keep and go over the day.
I, you know what? Wait, how long are your podcasts?
So we do 2 a week, and we do 1 interview, which is about an hour, and then 1 which is solo, which is probably usually about 10 to 20 minutes.
Okay. You have a team that edits yours.
I do. Well, I have a son who edits mine. So I say I've done all right. He's 24 now. He's my videographer and editor. So yeah.
Amazing. Wow. And finally, what is one thing that you're grateful for today?
One thing that I'm grateful for today. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure meeting you and having a chat with you. So definitely got to include that. It's been really enjoyable. So thank you so much for having me on and taking the time to ask me some great questions as well. That was some really good questions that you had in there. Made me think for a few moments, and I feel like we put the world to rights. So I'm definitely grateful for that. I'm also always grateful for the amazing team that I have supporting me as far as my staff, my able training and other businesses staff. There's only 13 at the minute, as I said earlier. It will be 100 one day, but they're wonderful and they're supportive, and I love them all to pieces. So yeah, I'm grateful for them.
Do you have a timeline of when you hope to have 100 staff?
My timeline. So I've only predicted my 12 months was to be up to 25. Yeah, I might be there. Maybe not. We're employing another couple this week, so maybe we'll be back. We'll be heading that direction. To have 100 staff, it's going to be at least, I think it was 10 years, and I'm about 3 years into that plan. So I think it's about 7 years time before I get there, maybe. But we'll see.
Okay. Um, and that's all the questions I have for you today. Thank you so much for coming onto our podcast.
That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you again so much for having me. It's really appreciated.
As we conclude this enlightening episode, I hope you gained valuable insights into the intricate world of human behaviour from the expertise shared by Andy Barker. From decoding the fundamental principles of behaviour analysis to exploring the nuances of neurodivergent behaviour and trauma-informed approaches, we've embarked on a journey of understanding that is both enriching and transformative. Remember, our understanding of behaviour extends beyond mere observation, delves into the depths of human experience, encompassing diverse perspectives and contexts. Whether you're an educator, a business leader, a healthcare professional, or simply someone navigating the complexities of human interaction, the principles discussed here offers practical guidance for fostering positive changes and growth. As we navigate the diverse landscape of behaviour, let us embrace empathy, compassion, and a commitment to inclusivity. Let us challenge ourselves to recognise the inherent worth and dignity of every individual, regardless of their neurodivergence, past experiences, or social identities. I encourage you to continue to explore the work of Andy Barker and other thought leaders in behaviour analysis, engage in conversations, seek opportunities for learning and growth, and apply these insights into your personal and professional spheres. Together, we can create environments that nurture understanding, resilience, and meaningful connection. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey of exploration and discovery. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more captivating conversations and insights into the fascinating world of human behaviour. Stay iconic. Until next time.